Curran Bhatia here ringside with Erno Labega. You are the vice president for the WBO. Your family actually created the WBO, is that right?
That's right. I'm the current second vice president of WBO, but my mom actually was a co-founder of WBO 35 years ago.
So boxing is in your blood.
It's in my blood.
Giving out these titles is in your blood. So we're here for Shakur Stevenson in Newark. There's a rich undercard here. What WBO titles are at stake tonight?
The only WBO title at stake tonight was the Shakur Stevenson Robson Consequel. However, they had the
it's an issue with the weight. Stevenson was 1.6 pounds over.
Correct.
And so that means that Stevenson must forfeit the title, right?
We forfeited the title. We say we lose the belt at the scales.
Yes.
But if the fight goes on, if Consequel wins the fight, he gets the title.
Yes.
If Stevenson wins, the belt remains vacant, the seat.
And what would be the procedure then if the belt remains vacant? What happens then?
We have to then install a new champion via a fight off or whatever the case.
And in terms of the fight going forward, there had to be negotiations between Stevenson and Canseco's team. Is the WBO involved in that, or is that independent?
No, that's independent. In addition, working with the promoter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with boxing, we know that there's 4 main belts, and there's many other belts. And your job with the WBO, how often do you interact with the WBC and the other entities in boxing, or do you operate independently?
We operate independently. However, if there is a unification fight, if there is a champion fighting for the WBO belt, if a champion has both the WBO, WBC, and WBA belt, they have 3 belts, then we all interact with each other at the fight. So here tonight, the Stevenson is also he has the WBC belt. So we have the WBC.
He used to have the WBC. Yeah.
Same story.
Yeah.
So so the WBC supervisor is also here. Right. So we work, but we don't work necessarily. We work a lot together now, but not necessarily on the fight itself.
And what about with the rankings? Because we know that entities will, supervising entities like yourself will say, well, here's your mandatory challenger. But in different belts, you could have a different challenger, right? And there's usually deadlines to fight them. So do you guys work together with that at all?
Not across the individual organization. Okay. We just deal with that within our own organization.
Okay. And what is the WBO's process for creating the rankings? Well, what is the process for that?
We have a ratings committee, and everything goes through the ratings committee based on the amount of fights, who you fought, when you fought, etc. So we follow all rules and regulations based on our ratings committee that looks at the records of all the fighters and then rank them accordingly.
And in terms of the rankings, that leads obviously to championship fights. The one thing that new boxing fans sometimes can get confused by is, well, they're like, well, how many champions are there per division? Do you think that's something that maybe could be improved in the sport of boxing? Somehow, getting maybe, I don't know if it's less belts or unifying them. What do you think about that?
You can't have more than 1 champion per division anyway. So you mentioned less champions or more champions.
Well, right now you have 4 champions.
We have 4 champions because you have 4 individual organizations.
Right, correct. So all in the same weight class, right?
All in the same weight.
Right.
Yeah, each organization has the same weight classes. Yeah. So you can have 4 champions.
Right.
But if you unify them, you can have two boxers fighting for the same belt.
Yes.
And it could be they could unify all the belts.
Right.
So,
which is what we want to see as boxing fans.
Yeah, boxing fans want to see one man winning all belts. That happens, but not as often as we would like.
Not as often as we like. So I guess that's my question. Is there anything, us as fans of the sport, you work in the sport, is there anything we could do to maybe have less belts or have more unification fights or some solution like that?
Well, the unification fights is all depending on the promoters and how they make their agreements and who fights with whom.
Yes.
So the organizations don't really have a setting stone for who wins and who loses and who fights. We just sanction the fights.
Yes.
So if we have a WBO champion who is going to be fighting for another belt, we sanction the fight. It can be unified, but that's not our call.
Right. And would you, if a champion for the WBO had to fight a mandatory, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Would you as the WBO prefer that he fights a mandatory, or if he has an opportunity to unify, would that take preference over a mandatory?
There are rules and regulations depending on the time for unification, depending on depending on the time for your mandatory.
Okay.
You can there's a time frame.
Yes.
So you can have a fight outside of your mandatory fight. So it depends on what the status is, your status and time of your next fight.
And you mentioned sanctioning fighters. Obviously, I think fighter safety is paramount, and I'm sure you're passionate about fighter safety, as we all are. What do you feel like the WBO does to make sure that fighter safety happens?
Fighter safety is our number one priority. We do everything to ensure fighter safety. We ensure all medicals are done, the pre-medicals, the medicals at the fight, before the fight. We make sure the venue has all the safety requirements. One of the jobs of the supervisor like me would be for that fight is to ensure that everything that has to be in place is in place. Always safety is our number one priority here.
Oh, that's definitely very important, as we all know. I want to thank you so much for chatting me, and enjoy the fights tonight.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy the fights also.
Thank you
See
so much.
at another WBO event.
Yes.